The Dvadasamsa is what I like to call the reincarnation chart. So this reincarnation chart talks about the connection of the present to the past and the future. So it's going to show us the assets that we have inherited. Maybe these are inherited through our family, like our parents, or maybe they're inherited from past life. And honestly, there's very little difference between the two, because the vehicle by which you inherit things from your past life is very often through your parents and your DNA. It will also show your whole longer ancestry. And most importantly, or most practically, let's say, the most practical thing about this chart is probably how it shows how much support you get from your ancestors, from your family, from your sources of inheritance. So in other words, how much is your family supporting you and helping you? Of course, you can also infer the activities and qualities of the past lives from this subchart. And then also, since it represents the future, not just the past, you can look ahead to see how you're going to die and what's in store afterwards. If you want to know what this means to you and your chart, I have just released a brand new and very groundbreaking report that explores exactly that, all of the subdivisions for your chart. It's available now on my site, victicare.com. So let's get started by talking about what this dwaadashaamsha thing literally is. What is it astronomically? Where does it come from? It's one of the 5 zodiacal subdivisions, and its architecture is based on 12ths. The way that you construct it is you take your regular zodiac and you divide each sign into 12 equal portions. Then you just start at the beginning of the zodiac, start at the beginning of Aries, and name those portions in order from Aries. However, when you get to the end of Aries, something unusual happens. It doesn't just keep going like we're used to from of the other subdivisions. It sort of skips a beat, doesn't it? Like the end of Aries has the Pisces subdivision, and then the beginning of Taurus has a Taurus subdivision. Similarly, the end of Taurus is an Aries subdivision, but then it skips going into Gemini. It skips over Taurus and goes straight to Gemini. So on closer look, what becomes obvious about the pattern that's going on here is simply that every single zodiac sign starts its 12ths with itself. So yeah, Aries starts with Aries and then goes sequentially for 12. But then Taurus starts with Taurus, thus skipping Aries, and goes sequentially for 12, thus ending with Aries. And then Gemini starts with Gemini, thus skipping Taurus, etc., etc., etc. So the pattern that results here is actually descriptive of reincarnation. So for example, you have this phenomenon that at the end of every sign, the divisions forget themselves in order to become the next sign's divisions. For example, at the end of Aries, Aries gets dropped, it gets forgotten so that the divisions can move on to become Taurus. So this is exactly analogous to how reincarnation works. We start off by assuming our identity at birth, and then it develops throughout our life, and then at death, you cannot move on until you forget that previous identity so that you can accept a new one. A lot of people think about reincarnation and, how come I can't remember my past lives? And that seems like some kind of a flaw or like a doubt about reincarnation. But it's hardly a flaw or a doubt. It's actually necessary, absolutely necessary, that we forget the previous identity. Otherwise, we are not able to adopt and embrace the new identity in the next life. And that is represented by the way that these dvadasamsa, these 12th subdivisions work in their ordering and how they skip themselves when they get to the end. There's one other interesting thing here, which is also important, is that by the time every sign gets to its end, it finally remembers the sign that it skipped. So that's also how we evolve through our life. So all in all, the pattern that's formed here by these 12 zodiac signs being split into 12 divisions each exactly illustrates the nature of reincarnation, and that is what this subchart symbolizes. Now let's quickly go over how you can figure out what your 12th subdivision chart is. Of course, the easiest way is to get my report and see what it is. But I'll show you the mechanism that go on in calculating this chart. And if you like, you can do it yourself. So all you have to do is divide the 30 degrees of a sign by 12 to figure out that each one of these 12s is 2.5 degrees long. And then you just take the positions of your planets, whatever they are in your normal chart, and you divide their degrees in their sign. You divide that by 2.5 to figure out which dwaadashaamsha each one is in. Once you've done that, pull up a new chart, a nice blank chart. Take the dvadasamsa sign of the ascendant and write it in the first house, and then go counterclockwise, filling in the rest of the houses in the natural order of the signs. Now you've established what the houses of your dvadasamsa are. The only thing that remains is to put the planets in the correct ones. So what you're doing here is you're consolidating all of the separate Aries into one Aries, all of the separate Tauruses into one Taurus, and that's why the chart is called a consolidation or a Varga. Once you have your chart drawn, you can interpret it like a regular chart. That's why you bother to draw it out as a chart. It's very useful. I'll talk about that in future videos, how you specifically tailor the interpretations of subcharts to the specific themes of the subchart. For now, I want to show you a few overview techniques that are very important to get a snapshot picture or a big picture of how the theme of dvadasamsa, how this reincarnation theme is working or not working for you. First thing you want to do is figure out the overall dignity in this whole chart, in this whole Varga. The more dignified, the more you have prosperity from your inherited stuff. And conversely, the more negative dignity there is in this chart, the more trouble you're getting from the stuff you've inherited, the more flaws are in it. So this is going to affect stuff like your inherited assets. Like, let's say, the traits that you have picked up as a result of your upbringing. If you have a lot of positive dignity in this chart, then overall that's very good. You've picked up very good inherited traits from your upbringing. And this also refers to actual like physical assets as well. If you have a lot of dignity in this subdivision, then you're probably getting a lot of wealth by virtue of the family that you're born into. Versus the other way around, if it's very negative dignity in this chart, then the family is probably draining your wealth or certainly not contributing to it. You also get a basic sense of your ancestry, your cultural background, and how well that cultural background works for you in terms of what you want to do and what you have to interface with. Another way of looking at this is that you see how much support you're getting from your family. The more positive, the more the family is supportive, encouraging, and practically helpful in giving you a firm financial background and also a firm emotional background. All of this stuff also affects your future. So with a lot of positivity in this chart, you're looking at a non-traumatic death, a positive death experience, and a positive transition into the afterlife with positive circumstances in the afterlife. Now, the way that you figure out the positivity or negativity in this chart is just to take an average of the dignity of all the planets in this chart. Another thing you can do with the chart overall is figure out which planets are more dominant in this chart and which planets are less dominant. So here you could see how the report presents that information to you, where the most dominant planets are at the top, and then it proceeds downwards in descending order of dominance. And if you want to know exactly how dominant they are, there's these bars underneath each planet. If you want to know how that's being calculated, it's based on how a particular planet lines up with the degree of the ascendant, sun and moon, and a couple of other factors. What the dominance list really tells you is, how do you approach this topic? In this particular subdivision, it's more like, what are the prominent things that are coming as your inherited assets? Which things are dominant on this list are your dominant assets or burdens that you're receiving from past life and through ancestry and through family. So in this particular case, you can see Mercury is very high. It's the highest planet on the list. So that's basically what this person is carrying over from their past life through the type of family that they were born in, through the kind of upbringing that they got as a result. You can go ahead and look and say it's not just any Mercury, it's Mercury in the 7th house in Taurus. So it's like an artistic way of interacting with lots of people and understanding lots of people and different things. So the report tries to give you a good starting point for working with interpreting this list. It gives you these kind of a verbal version of this list. And this format also makes it clear that the less dominant planet is actually the more subliminal root of the more dominant planet. So for example, this person has inherited a lot of interactivity. So that means they're very curious about other people. But you can further see that the root or the cause of it in this case is Venus. So that's because they have a lot of love or affection, especially because this Venus, as the other list shows, or as the chart shows, is in the 5th house. So the lower down you go on this list, the more you get to things that even you might not really be aware of, but are really the underlying motivations or the underlying things at work that have come across from the past life. This list has a couple of icons on it that are pretty important to understand. The upside down triangle, the right side up triangle, and the flag. In this particular example, there are no upside down triangles. So that's a great thing for this individual. What an upside down triangle represents is this is something you should try to avoid. You should try to play this down a little bit. Upside down triangles will show up on your list if you have a dominant planet that doesn't have a great dignity. You can see 3 right side up triangles, however, and that's where you have a planet that's low on the dominant list, but has a lot of good dignity. So for example, the Saturn is the second to lowest planet in the dominance list, but it has 100% dignity in its house. So here's an area where the native could play it up more, or could try to focus on this more. So they probably aren't really understanding how much the Saturn influence from their past life is beneficial to them, and therefore they're not relying on it as much. The third type of symbol on this list is the flag, and it's very, very useful to check and see where you've got flags. Again, this list is pretty clean. So this is another indication that this is a very good dvadasamsa. It doesn't have upside down triangles, it doesn't have flags. But there's one flag here on the sun. It's coming after Jupiter. What the flag indicates is you're transitioning from a benefic type planet to a malefic type planet. And what that does is it confuses issues, and it confuses presentation, and it confuses people who are trying to deal with you. So in this particular case, this person has inherited a certain type of Jupiter, right, which is moderately dominant. It's a Jupiter in the 11th house, so they probably have a lot of artistic understanding, or understanding about what benefits people. But when they use that inherited skill, it gets followed up, or it has a root from the sun, which is a lot of confidence. So it confuses people because I thought you're trying to be generous with me, but yet you also seem to be pretty individualistic or egoistic or standoffish, like self-oriented. And also another thing to note about flags is if they're not high up on the list, they might not be terribly important. But if you have a flag on a planet that's your second planet on the list, or even your third, then it's something that you should really put your attention on and try to figure out how to be more gentle in the switching of gears between the first planet and the second planet. Now, the only remaining question is, how do you get this report so that you can get this information for yourself? That's fairly easy. You go to my website, victorcara.com, and you click on the readings link, and then you select what module you want. If you want the basic chart interpreted, get the basic module. And if you want all of your subdivisions, including the saptamsha, interpreted, then you click to include also the subdivisions module. And then you click this to enter your birth data, and then you click this button to order it. Please don't forget to like and comment, and your likes and your comments help YouTube recognize that this video is something that should be shown to new people. So please help out with that. Thank you so much.